My name is Kelly Michaud. Hi. I'm the Youth Program Coordinator at the Birmingham Bloomfield Community Coalition, and I am actually standing in for our amazing Executive Director, Carol Mastriani. We were going to do this in tandem, and unfortunately she's not feeling well this week. So I think one of the emails I saw is we're going to soldier on. So that's what we're doing. So we're all soldiers in this together. And I want to just point out, first of all, that this is the result of an amazing collaboration between not only the BBCC, Bloomfield Hills Schools, who allowed us to be in this room, the PTOC, which is why I think many of you that are here tonight are here, and Bloomfield Youth Assistance. They have formed an amazing prevention, mental health, and wellness committee that is the reason that we're all here tonight. And there was something 2 nights ago I heard, and there will be many more things to come. So it's great that this is being filmed because it will have staying power and more people will be able to see it. So I'm sorry, I don't have an advancer, so I have to stand here, but it's kind of a small space anyway, so that's okay. So a little bit about the Birmingham Bloomfield Community Coalition. For those of you that don't know, we're youth-focused substance use and abuse prevention, but mental health and wellness support. We really try to bring the community together to support our youth in what they're going through and the challenges that they face every day. And we, by the way, give teens a positive voice and presence in this. We don't really do anything without talking to teens, because if we want to impact their behavior, we have to include them in everything that we do. Part of that is our Youth Action Board, which is the primary part of my job. I work with students on a regular basis from schools, Birmingham and Bloomfield, public and private. We come together, we talk about drug and alcohol use, but we also really talk about what they're going through. Stress and anxiety, by the way, has come up right around 2012, 2013, 2014. We were talking about drugs and alcohol, and they said, we need to be talking about stress. That's the root cause of any decision that we make. And so we incorporated that into everything we do. We incorporated that into our teen survey. So the young people that are sitting here may have already taken our survey. We survey all of the teens 8th through 12th grade. So that's the other way that we give them a voice. It's an anonymous survey. So we get anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 plus, depending on how the survey goes each year it is administered. So we have a really good data set. That's on par, you guys, with national data, by the way. So we have a really good data set that we can trend dating back to 2005. It's incredible. I have to wear my cheaters if I want to see what I want to say. So yeah, we're giving teens a voice and a presence in this. We're research driven. As I just said, I talked about our survey. You're going to see our data in here from our 2021 survey. I also have some national data in here for you to consider so that you can see just what a rising concern vaping is among our young people. So we're evidence-based and we're youth-driven, and you know what I just said, we work with the community and the schools and you guys that are here to help our youth make good decisions about their own safety, health, and wellness. All right, so let's get right into it. This is why we're here. What's vaping? But before that, I want to ask you a question. Is smoking cigarettes bad for your health? Everybody just say, right? We all understand this, right? It's not a good thing. So then what about vaping? Why is it so difficult for young people to stay in that same vein of thinking and not understand that anything you inhale and take into your precious lungs is going to be bad for you? So what is vaping? If you didn't know it, I've got a definition. We looked it up and here it is. It's the act of inhaling and exhaling the aerosol, vapor, in parentheses there, produced by an e-cigarette or a similar device. This term is used because these devices do not produce tobacco smoke, but rather an aerosol, often mistaken for water vapor that consists of fine particles. Many of these particles contain varying amounts of toxic chemicals which have been linked to cancer as well as respiratory and heart disease. So before we get into like a lot of information, I want to just show you a personal story.
All right, so it is day number 2. I just woke up and the first thing I did was go to grab my vape, which usually sits right about there, but it wasn't there this morning.
That's Parker. He's a college student, a gamer, and has been nicotine-free for about 5 months. Parker started vaping while he was a freshman in high school because a bunch of his friends were doing it. Back then, he would turn to vaping to relieve his anxiety, but now believes the habit was making his anxiety worse.
What made you start to realize that connection?
There were times where I would go out and I would need to have my vape with me at all times. And whenever I would get anxious, I would hit it. And when I didn't have it, it would exemplify the effects of my anxiety and my stress.
When you look back now at how you were feeling when you were vaping, how strong is the connection between your vape pen and anxiety?
Extremely strong. I think that most times where I had mass amounts of anxiety or panic, it was always correlated to the fact that I had it with me or I was using it.
The Truth Initiative, a nonprofit working to combat tobacco use and nicotine addiction, is helping Parker share his story as part of their ongoing effort to help young people quit. A survey by the organization found that 81% of people start vaping to decrease anxiety, depression, or stress. But some experts say it does the opposite.
People who have a tendency to have mental health problems, increased stress, anxiety, depression are more likely to vape. But vaping also worsens mental health symptoms, particularly of stress, anxiety, and sometimes depression as well.
And here's the science behind it.
Initially, you get this boost of dopamine into your brain. That really tricks people into thinking, oh yeah, this is something that's good, it definitely feels good. But over time, what happens is your body creates more nicotine receptors in the pleasure center of the brain, making it harder for you to reduce stress through any other means than to take another hit of this product.
That's why Dr. Winikoff says vaping is so dangerous, but there is a silver lining.
If you are able to quit, it actually creates a really positive mental health picture, which is why cessation programs are just so important, because there's nothing about this that traps you forever.
Alyssa Bottolato quit vaping about a year ago and hasn't looked back.
My anxiety is better. I'm able to have clearer thoughts. Just overall, I feel more myself and I feel better.
What would you say to someone who's there right now, who thinks that vaping is actually helping their mental health?
I would look them straight in the face and say, that's what I thought too, but it's not the truth. So if you have that even little bit of yourself that wants to quit, wants to get over it, you're already there. That's all that it takes. And you just have to put some drive behind that. And you'll see the positive outcomes that will come into your life.
I'm going to stop it there because I have much more to go through, and you're going to hear more stories. But I want to draw your attention to a couple of things that they said in there, that the very thing that many young people are going to vapes to calm their stress and anxiety and alleviate it. Even if they start for experimental reasons, they feel like it's going to calm them down. It's actually having the opposite and more of an adverse effect because they're constantly in withdrawal and needing those dopamine receptors to pick up the nicotine, which is activating their pleasure center. And I'm going to show you, you got to become a scientist when you look at this stuff, but it really is very basic. And if you talk to anybody that's ever smoked, knowing how hard it is to quit smoking, it's because that is just how addictive nicotine is. So we'll see more stories from young people, but I thought right off the bat to get you into a personal story and a story of hope, right? Two people there who vaped, who quit and are smiling and dealing with their life, that actually gives me some hope and a sense of what we do has purpose. So what is a vape and how is it used? If you don't know, and probably many of you don't know, and I hope that's the case, but this is sort of the timeline of e-cigarettes and vape generationally. So it started out like a cig-alike, right, in 2007, around that time. And most delivered nicotine and were disposable. This, as it started, was supposed to be a safer alternative to traditional tobacco cigarettes and a safe way to either smoke and get your nicotine or to quit smoking was the way that they marketed it at the time, right, for adults. Keep that in mind. And then variations on the first e-cigarettes included products like e-cigarettes, e-hookahs, rechargeable devices. Even then, look, it's looking just a little bit more fun and funky there, right? Vape pens were next. These have batteries that can reach higher temperatures, have refillable liquid charges, and allow users to regulate the frequency of what they're inhaling. Then came mods. These were larger in size. These were modified. They allowed more aerosol, more nicotine, and other chemicals, including flavors, right? So that's when we started to see flavors somewhere in between the pens and the mods. And then we go to the pod-based, which look very much like a USB device, correct? And they contain higher amounts of nicotine than the previous generations. So, you know, vape culture was looking for more of everything, and so the industry just kept up with it. And these are just basic. I'm going to show you what, you know, vapes en masse look like. So e-cigarettes and vapes are also known in the prevention world as ENDS because it's an electronic nicotine delivery system. A wide variety of products, as you can see here. This is the latest, puff bars, which are disposable and able to get outside of the regulations and the flavor bans that started in 2020 and 21 and are being really held up and challenged in court by the larger companies. That's like a kind of fun look at vape pens that you were seeing when those were first coming out. They can be odorless, although with flavors, there's a sweet smelling scent. If you ever, you know, suspect anything and you start to smell scents, it does go away, but there is an odor immediately. But it also can be odorless. And the reason so many youth are using, and you find that they're using in school, is because the vapor comes out, but it goes away very quickly. But I'll talk another issue about that. It doesn't just go away. It lands places. They use battery-powered coil to turn a liquid solution into an aerosol. There's a heating element. And some of them really connect to other electronic devices to play music, answer calls. The vape culture has closed where you can run your vape through it, and all fun and funky things. So they certainly have done everything they can to appeal to younger people, not adults. And here we go. This is an anatomy of an e-cigarette or a vape. It's got a mouthpiece. It's a cartridge that holds, this is the tank that holds the juice, the heating element that makes the juice into a vapor, a microprocessor, and then they have a switch to activate the heating element. And then there's a battery. Some devices, you know, even light up so it looks like you're burning a cigarette or burning something. And then this is just another way to look at all the components, right? We've got a battery, we've got an atomizer, that's the heating element, then you've got the e-liquid that you buy separately. Sometimes it comes right in with it. You've got a cartridge, and then you've got the aerosol that is heated, and then after that it's inhaled into the body and then out into the air. But all of these things that make up an e-cigarette or a vape, right? These all contain chemicals, of course the liquid, but even the elements of the device itself have metal and chemical compounds that are all a part of what's going into your body. So it's only water and flavoring, right? So you have to kind of be a scientist to really understand. This sort of looks like a chemistry chart, and I really apologize. This is not school, I know. But all of these have been found in e-cigarette aerosol, which is in the liquid. So these components in yellow from the FDA in 2012 have been deemed harmful and potentially harmful substances. This is an established list. All of these things are found in e-cig aerosol. So if you can see some of these things, just because flavorings are FDA approved for food to be consumed, and many of them probably aren't even great in some of the foods, right, like red dye, that doesn't mean it's okay for you to inhale into your precious lungs. And even though it's filtered out, it doesn't mean it's actually filtered out of your lungs. So where else can some of these components be found? So started here with rubidium, which is found in fireworks. And then propylene glycol can be found in antifreeze. Acetone in nail polish remover. Ethylbenzene in paints and pesticides. Formaldehyde. That's an embalming component, so yum. And then obviously nicotine, which can be found in cigarettes, which is, we're going to talk much more about that. All right, so again, here's a comparison between, this is a traditional Juul, which years ago was kind of the big thing. It was the reason behind the vaping epidemic before COVID hit. And that's when things were just starting to emerge, other competing products, but Juul really started it all, versus the other cartridge type based. But the biggest concern with the Juuls and this type of a device is it's salt-based. Versus the one on the right, which is free-base nicotine. And the concern here is that salt-base is a much higher concentration of nicotine versus free-base. So 59 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter. That doesn't, when you're talking about milligrams or milliliters, how much is that? It doesn't sound like very much, but it's actually a really high amount of nicotine, and I'll show you an example. Versus this type of a device, which can have anywhere from 0% to 36 milligrams of nicotine per milliliter. 36 is actually really high, but not even as high as this. So that is the concern with Juul and why everyone was so outraged, and they were calling for regulations and going after Juul in a lot of ways. So pods are not refillable, and then this has a refillable tank. I'm just kind of showing you some of the different devices because you may not recognize these, or you may think, oh, that's just, a USB, or, that's just something, for school or for a game or a device. It's all not recognizable, but it all can be explained maybe. So going back to 59 milligrams per milliliter, how much is that? So this is a typical sort of Juul. It contains this many Juul vape cartridges that goes into the device that it's then vaped. So here, this is mango flavor, which was very popular at the time, and it says it's just 5% strength, right? That's not much. That's what you might seemingly think, but they want you to be confused. What do you mean, 5% strength of what? How much is 5%? That's 59 milligrams per milliliter. So what does that mean? So here's the Juul pod. It's extremely high, like I said. It's equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. And this is, look at the similarities between the visual of the cigarettes to the Juul pod. That's going to come up again later. And every Juul pod contains nicotine versus the other one that I showed you that can have 0. But, when young people are searching this out, getting it from somebody else, they don't know. That's a lot of nicotine. And this device is typically used, right, in one session and thrown away. And then also keep in mind when you do vape, I don't know this personally, but it has been shown that when you vape versus a traditional tobacco cigarette, you rip or hit or take in harder. Just that's the normal way you use the device versus something else. So it's a lot more going in at one time. That's why there's so much frequency of use. And then there's puff bars. The newest trend. These are disposables, so they've managed to get outside of regulations as well. So they have them in increasing amounts of nicotine, right? This is 400 puffs, 800, 1,800, and wow, 5,000 puffs for your money. So the entry-level puff bar is the equivalent to 2 packs worth of nicotine. This puff bar plus equals 5 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine, and the puff bar flow, 9 1/3 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine in one disposable device. And then the other really concerning trend, and we hear this from our Youth Action Board teens and from other students, it is a gateway. Once kids start vaping, and as kids get older, we see this in our data, they vape more as they get older, and they use vapes with THC much more as they get older. And it's a perception, right? It's legal, so it's not harmful, and many of them may have adults in their life that are using vapes regularly and are using vapes with THC. So you look at the adults in your world, and if they're okay, what's wrong with me doing it? So concentrates are another way to use a much higher concentration of THC. As a young person, these are extremely high concentrations of THC, and then you can buy it in all of these different various forms. In marijuana dispensaries and online. It's really easy just to click a box. Yep, I'm 18, or yep, I'm 21. this is intentional, right? We have trendy products and marketing, but this was going to be for the generation that didn't have a nicotine addiction. We spent years working on nicotine in cigarettes, years, and regulations and bans and the marketing and the intention of it. But that's not happening now. Decades later, e-cigarette and vaping companies are still taking the page from big tobacco playbook, right? Here's an ad back in the the 50s, a Lucky Strike cigarette ad, and that's a young girl, and she's lucky to be using Lucky Strike. And here's a Juul ad marketing. This is comparison of decades later, and it's happening all over again. So we have trendy products, right? And I wonder what age this is targeted to. Remember when I talked about vapes, e-cigarettes being intended for a safe way to meet for an adult not to smoke or to stop smoking? Why does it look like this? We've got old versus new. So Newport, manufacturer of blue, Marlboro, Mark 10, and then Camel, Vuse, right? Look at the similarities. Remember I pointed that out earlier between the Marlboro pack of cigarette and the Juul pod. And here's the trail, right? Here are the links between cigarette and vaping brands. You have the tobacco companies across the top, Reynolds being responsible for Camel, Pall Mall, Newport, and American Spirit. They also make Vuse, which is a very popular vape device. Altria, Philip Morris. They make Marlboro, Parliament, and Virginia Slims. Also in the vape world, Green Smoke, Mark 10, IQOS, and Juul. And then Imperial, which makes Winston, Salem, Cool, and Maverick, is the blue manufacturer. So there's a lot on this slide, and I kind of highlighted what I want you to pay attention to, but keep in mind that even though Juul has come under a lot of fire, they still hold the majority of the U.S. e-cigarette sales market share. But the rise of disposable cigarettes and other brands are starting to erode that. So disposable e-cigarettes have nearly doubled in just 10 months from 2019 to 2020 after the FDA restricted flavors. Remember I talked about that? Making disposable e-cigarettes with youth more appealing because they can get the flavors that way. And then again, when the bans were made on the non-disposable, they still allowed menthol. So what we're seeing and what this article is telling you that they're just shifting what they're doing. They're going to disposables and they're finding a way to get the flavors, or they're just going to menthol. Menthol sales rose 57.7% after that ban happened. So indicating that as other flavors were either voluntary pulled or removed as a result of policy changes, users just simply switched what they were doing. They're going to find a way. The other thing that we heard from students right before the pandemic and during the pandemic is that people stockpiled product. Young people did, and were selling it, sort of like black market style. So that was happening. That's how you can always get things, right? You can find it if you need to online and through social media. So this is an article from U.S. News and World Report just this month. I found a lot of headlines. I didn't include them all, but just to let you know that right before the pandemic, around March and April of 2019, we were getting a lot of attention surrounding vapes and bans. But then COVID hit, and we had something new to worry about and pay attention to. And then we were on lockdown, and everybody was home. But once again, now that we're back to normal, I don't know if everybody feels normal, but we are back to normal, we are back together, and we are seeing the rates rise again. And so that's why we're here tonight, to educate you on that, hopefully give you some new information and give you something to talk to your students about. So there's not much progress. The FDA tried to ban the leading e-cigarette maker Juul's products earlier this summer, but it was blocked with a court challenge. So you really just need to follow the money trail, right? And then there's this highlighted here. They missed deadlines. It's just one thing after the other with the regulations. Things get held up. Again, when you want to ask me, because this is the first thing I ask when I'm talking about this, and when I talk with our national partners, why can't we regulate this? What's being done? And it's trying, but it's really slow progress, right? There have been delays, right, which have allowed e-cigarettes to stay on the market without review. The FDA told a federal court in May that it won't finish its review of marketing applications until June of 2023. So that's 2 years after it was first filed. And then in 2017, I found this really interesting. They began issuing warning letters to e-cigarette manufacturers and distributors and retailers. But nearly all those letters were sent to small retailers, while none of the larger manufacturers or distributors were called out on this. And then again, most youth and young adults are just using the disposables and other devices anyways. So it's not really making much progress. There's just more here, to reiterate what I just said. There needs to be more transparency. I mean, and you can all, contact our representatives and our legislators and make it known this is important to you. Parents Against Vaping, PAVE, is a really good organization that wants to hear from parents and that will actually go and lobby for this issue for us. And I've had meetings with them. What about second and now third-hand exposure, right? So traditionally you see somebody smoking. We talk about secondhand smoke being a really dangerous thing with traditional cigarettes. The smoke comes out and that doesn't go away, it lingers, right? You smell that and it's really an issue for the family members and the people around you. But what about vaping, right? And then what about third-hand smoke? So that vapor, just because it goes away, doesn't mean secondhand exposure isn't an issue, and then third-hand exposure, right? So there's vaping, it goes away, but it doesn't really just go away. It's landing on the people and the environment around us, the furniture, it's just there, the clothes, right? The bed, if they're doing it in bed, what they're sleeping in, the chemicals are there. Those don't evaporate. They go somewhere. And I sat in on a webinar 2 weeks ago, and the early research indicated that they were doing that this might be a really good talking point for young people to understand that if you think this is safe, it's not, number one. And number two, now you are impacting the environment around you of people that don't want to be impacted by it. So I was encouraged that young people might really respond to this. So these are some headlines that I grabbed just from this past few weeks. Teen vaping rates rise, nearing the pre-pandemic levels. The CDC reported this, and that was huge. We were in a vape crisis then, and I think we're nearing that again. And this was October 6th, and the author of this article. Just a few more. Teenagers keep vaping despite crackdowns on e-cigarettes. And this one here from USA Today, more than 2.5 million middle and high school students still vape despite the crackdowns. It's a lot of kids. So what does that mean, right? What happened just before the pandemic? So the CDC, because of the incredible amount of illnesses they were seeing in teens and young adults, said we have got a new illness. They called it EVALI, e-cigarette or vaping product use associated with lung injury. That's a mouthful, try to say that 5 times fast. But it's no joke. We have people who got really, really sick from vaping, and they needed a name for it. So how does vaping impact your body? So let's hear from Chance. He's an 18-year-old student at the time from Florida.
They don't fit anything else that we have previously worked on, understood about lung disease that's more typical in teens.
So essentially you're seeing a pattern.
A pattern that's different from what we've seen before, yes. This is throughout the entire lung. So on the chest x-ray, the whole thing looks abnormal equally throughout the entire lung.
I would say my chest felt like it was collapsing and tightening up and I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was genuinely having a heart attack.
All right, so how else does it impact a teen body? And well, we're going to start here with the brain damage. Vaping affects your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for your decision making, your emotions, and your impulse control. And if you didn't know this, this is the critical stages of development from the time we're born through life. And what you see here to the far right, judgment in the prefrontal cortex, throughout adolescence, right, until the time in the mid-20s we now know, that's where most of the brain development is happening, in your prefrontal cortex, right here in your frontal lobe. So that's responsible, as I said, for judgment, decision-making, moral reasoning, all the things that sort of link choice to consequence, and also your impulse controls, things that, aren't fully developed. And that's not anything to say that other than it's fact, right? Your brains and your bodies are developing. It's why as teens, you don't understand why your parents flip out over something that is no big deal to you, right? And it's why we don't understand, why is this no big deal to you? It's because it's still coming along there. So adolescent behavior in the brain, right? This is a little bit of what I was just saying. You're going to be adept to more increased risk-taking, impulsivity, novelty-seeking, right? Because that's all still being developed. So that makes you even more vulnerable to a risky choice, right? Initiation of using something that you normally wouldn't. You know it's wrong, but you're in a situation, there's peer pressure there, you're not sure what to do, impulse takes over. And then that's really going to impede the development of that area of your brain. It's going to cause, and is that permanent? Yes, it can be. This is just a look at addiction. And what this is showing you is that the earlier teens use any substance, right? Whether it's vapes with nicotine, THC, alcohol, or something more substantial. There is a greater risk of addiction. And you can just see here when you first use before the age of 15, it's a much higher rate of addiction, and we're even hearing of this, in 6th and 7th grade. So much younger, 12 and 13. First used before 15, it goes down, 18 to 20, and then 21 plus. So talking about nicotine in the brain and how it actually works. So nicotine is delivered by smoking or vaping. It travels through your body, through your blood system, to the brain. That's how it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier. It activates the nicotine receptors. You heard the doctor in the first clip talk about the dopamine receptors. That's what happens. That releases the dopamine. And then that leads to the pleasurable feelings, right? Oh, that feels good. That's great. Then it goes away, and then that's when the stress, the withdrawal, and anxiety, and you need that again, especially when you are young and you want to feel good. You don't want to feel bad. You want that feeling all the time. This is what that looks like in just a little bit different way, right? So you smoke, you inhale it, it's traveling through your blood system, your capillaries, and then it binds to those receptors that cause those feelings of pleasure, right? And then when it goes away, you want more. Sorry for all of the science, guys, but it's important to understand. So what causes nicotine to be addictive? It binds to the receptors. You're rewarded for that behavior, right, which you know is not good for you. And then it alters the brain function, and that requires the nicotine in order for you to continue to feel good. But the problem with that, and I love this when you think about it as a nicotine brain, right? Nicotine, play on nicotine. After repeated exposure, those brain cells can change. And that's going to reduce your body's ability to release its own pleasurable feelings in its own way. What normally gives you that pleasure? If you're working out, if you're listening to music, if you're doing something you love to do, you're not going to be able to do that because you're putting so much nicotine in your body, and in your brain is going to look for that to feel better. So in the short term, early exposure to nicotine during these developmental years affects that brain function and important for reward processing. Additionally, the unwanted symptoms of nicotine withdrawal often occur between uses. That includes irritability, anxiety, stress, and/or depression. So I know because it's the teen years, how do you tell what's what? Well, I'll talk about that in a little bit too. So research shows there are several connections between nicotine and mental health, right? We are talking all about mental health lately, and this is a tough time. Coming back to normal, it's not any easier. We're back to 120%, aren't we? So the stress is probably there. But e-cigarette users have double the odds of having a diagnosis of depression compared to those who have never vaped. And there's some statistics for you there, but I know this is a lot. It can worsen the symptoms of depression. Based on a study that this study showed, 2,500 ninth graders who had never previously used e-cigarette or combustible tobacco. And then a higher frequency was associated with higher depressive symptoms, right? So if you use more, it's going to cause more depressive symptoms. And then the trace metals found in vape liquids play a role in the potential link between vaping and depression. And this I thought was really interesting. There is an associated with higher levels of ADHD symptoms based on a 2019 study of college students. And if you're starting vaping in high school, chances are you're going to keep vaping in college, and maybe do it more because you're on your own. So this is a little bit of a repeat, but it can worsen anxiety symptoms and amplify feelings of depression. Here's that ADHD statistic. This is just from another source. It can make medications to treat mental health challenges less effective. As well as, this is important, young people who quit vaping also report feeling less stressed and less anxious and less depressed. So that's an important thing to note. And I want you guys to follow this on social media. Don't do it right now because I don't want you to get your phones out. But follow the Truth Initiative on social media. Parents do it too. But I loved this campaign. It's a breath of stress air, showing you that the very thing you might be thinking is calming you down and taking away your stress is going to lead to more stress and anxiety. And this is just another way of looking at that. This is one of their latest posts. A very great vape prevention organization, and they have a really cool social media. They also have Ditch Vape. They have a really cool text system to get help and support to quit vaping. So you can take a picture of that if you want, or if you follow it. We feature that prominently in our drug and alcohol prevention posters that go up in the schools. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to ask for help to quit. Ditch to Vape we put on there. They can text. It's anonymous. None of their friends will know they're doing it, and it gives you all kinds of support to quit vaping. Because we find many students don't want to vape, but they're now addicted and they can't stop. So they definitely need the help, and you're not going to get a prescription for a nicotine step down because they're not 18. So, you have to find what's going to help you. I did talk to a pediatrician at one of our events over the summer who gave me his business card and said, I want to talk to you because I give prescriptions to parents all the time so they can give it to their children, to the nicotine patches, to stop vaping. So it is something that we need to figure out and address. So what does this mean? It can take just seconds for that nicotine, once it enters your body and travels through your blood system, to reach your brain, right? And I've talked about the brain changes that can make. Addiction, decreased learning, attention, memory, mood disorders, all of it I've talked about a lot. Then the flavoring compounds and the chemicals that create the aerosols enter into your lungs unfiltered and become embedded. That chemical residue literally sits on your lung tissue and can create inflammation, which you saw in the last video, how sick he got from that. Nicotine is known to have effects also on the cardiovascular system. You heard him say, I genuinely felt like I was having a heart attack, right? That was not lost on me. So not only lung disease, but cardiovascular diseases. So smokeless is not harmless. What does this really look and feel like? So we also have heard that vaping serious illnesses, including EVALI, can be resulted in lipoid pneumonia. So it's caused when the lipids, which are essentially fatty acids, which are contained in those chemicals that are in vapes, enter the lungs and become inflamed, versus regular pneumonia, which is an infection that causes inflamed air sacs, right? But the fatty acids that from those chemicals that can be found in e-cigarettes cause lipoid pneumonia. And so when those chemicals enter your airways, right, and get into your lungs, they paralyze the cilia, right? Those are the things in your lungs, that hair-like, that actually protect you from the environment, right? But when that residue enters and actually sits on the cilia, it sort of paralyzes it, right? They're unable to do their job protecting you from filtering it out, right? It sits on the cilia, it sits on your lung tissue. And that gets you at the risk for the infection that you saw and you'll see again. So here's a few more photos that we grabbed. These are some young people's pictures before and after they were hospitalized for their lung disease or EVALI or pneumonia. This young lady, we're gonna see her story in a second. Is that worth the risk? Would you want this to happen to you or one of your friends or your siblings or your cousin or your children? These are a couple of other images. This is the one young girl we just saw, and we're gonna see her story right here.
You hid your vape underneath your pillows.
Yeah.
And you would come and smoke how often?
Oh, I couldn't go longer than like 10, 15 minutes without hitting it. It was so addicting. I brought it with me everywhere I went.
Seema Herman never expected that what she thought was a harmless habit, vaping, would end up nearly killing her.
It took 2 days for my lungs to fail and I almost died.
The 18-year-old going viral with this photo from her hospital bed, a tube still pumping oxygen to her failing lungs. In her hands, a call to action.
Asked for like a pen and paper because that was the only way I could communicate. And I wrote, I want to start a no vaping campaign. That was the first thing I did when I opened my eyes.
Seema's story is just the latest in a landslide of incidents linked to vaping, sparking what many officials are calling a national health crisis.
What we've seen in the course of the past, let's say, month, is an increased number of people who are coming in with respiratory problems as a result of vaping.
So far, the Centers for Disease Control report more than 450 possible cases in 33 states of lung illness associated with vaping. And 6 deaths have been confirmed in California, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Oregon, and now Kansas. Last Friday, the CDC issued a stark warning. If you are vaping, no matter how old you are, you should consider stopping.
Like, I didn't think of myself as a smoker. The vaping just makes it seem like it's nothing, like you're doing nothing wrong.
Seema was in high school when she started vaping nicotine.
I was 16 the first time, 15 even, the first time I bought it at the smoke shop. I went in and I was like, can I get a pack of Juul pods? And they were like, how old are you? And I said 22. And they were just like, okay. It ended up becoming my oxygen. I couldn't live without it. I needed it all the time, every day. But because all of my friends were doing it all the time and no one else had symptoms that I had, I couldn't, like, I wouldn't even have imagined that maybe this is killing me.
Seema was an active, healthy teen. She'd been dancing for years, even making dance team her freshman year of college. But as her vaping habit increased, adding in cannabis, her ability to dance disappeared. She was vaping a cartridge a day. That's like smoking the same amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes in one day. Her parents had no idea their daughter had become hopelessly addicted.
This healthy dancer dancing 12 hours a week stopped dancing because of it, stopped living because of it, stopped going to school and college because of it.
Seema says she was feeling sick all the time.
Over a year, I lost like 50 pounds without trying.
50 pounds?
Yeah.
By this summer, Seema had stopped going to her college classes. She says her health issues were getting worse, but no doctor could nail down what was wrong.
Did you not tell the doctors that you vaped?
I actually did. I made sure that every hospital, every ER, every doctor's office I went to, I told them that I smoked.
But you never thought, I can't breathe, I feel like I'm gonna die. Maybe it's because I'm vaping every 10 to 15 minutes.
No doctor ever said, like, maybe you should stop vaping.
It all came to a head on August 15th when Seema's dad rushed her to the ER.
I said, go fast. Don't let me close my eyes. Don't let me fall asleep or I won't wake up.
Now, why did you say that?
Because I knew I was dying.
You felt death on you?
Yeah. It was terrifying. The worst part was I couldn't let it, like, my parents watch it happen to me.
But hospital staff couldn't figure out why Seema couldn't breathe. 2 days later, doctors had to put her on a ventilator.
I was begging them, vent her faster, she's going to die. And it was terrifying.
It was in that agonizing moment that Seema's cousin revealed her secret addiction.
She said, you know, she smokes every day. I said, what? What are you talking about? She said, she smokes every day. She smokes that vape. I said, you tell the doctors right now. You go tell the doctors right now. And I ransacked her room and I found all the vapes. They look like gum wrappers. They look like little candy wrappers. They look like little cute mascara wands.
This progression is so fast.
Dr. Catherine Melamed is a pulmonologist at UCLA Medical Center. She worked on Seema's case.
This was Seema's chest x-ray when she came into our hospital. These hazy white areas here at the base, at the bottom of her lungs, just show that she could have a pneumonia. But what you can then see is if we choose an x-ray from just less than 48 hours later, now her lungs, all of this white haziness here is inflammation. From just day 1 to day 3 is remarkable.
Dr. Melamed is on the front lines of what health officials fear is an emerging crisis. The National Youth Tobacco Survey found a 78% jump in e-cigarette usage among high school students alone, but any research on the impacts of vaping lags far behind.
Part of vaping is heating oil and then inhaling that oil. And that's not something the lung is used to inhaling. And so with that comes an inflammatory reaction that then produces phlegm and sputum and gives the lungs sort of that wet cough phlegm property.
That sounds terrible.
Yes.
And dangerous.
Yes.
Last month, 17-year-old Tristan Zofeld described how he spent 18 days in the hospital fighting for his life after vaping.
I woke up just throwing up everywhere and my heart was just pounding out of my chest going 100 miles an hour.
Tristan lost 15 pounds and said he had to relearn to walk. And just yesterday, a Texas teen had to be rushed to the hospital after vaping at school.
So that's just a close-up of what we saw on the video. Her lungs, which are hazy, but 48 hours later, as the doctor showed you in the video. Then this is Chance, the one we saw a little bit earlier. This is both his and his mother's social media posts, right? He started his own nonprofit called Lung Love because he wanted to take what happened to him, nearly dying, and prevent anybody else from starting juuling or vaping or anything. And these are his own personal quotes. I show these when I'm out in class sessions as well, so I just don't have the time to do videos. And these are his quotes, which you heard him say, and that's his nonprofit. And then the last personal example I want to show you is for you to meet Daniel Ament. This is him at 17 being rushed to Henry Ford Hospital for his double lung transplant. Daniel is a young man from the Grosse Pointe community. He is the only person that I know of, maybe there's 2 in the country, that have been given the gift of life, new lungs, because of their vaping illness. And we met Daniel just after, when he was still in high school, and he created his own nonprofit because he wanted to, again, prevent this from happening to anybody else. And he has spoken in several assemblies, virtual, because his health can be compromised, over the past 3 years. And he's 20 now, and he's doing filmmaking. He's made a film about his own story, but his story is quite something. These are his diseased lungs. This is him again. This is he's got a whole nonprofit. I encourage you to go check it out. This is the man who performed his surgery. These, I can't even make out lungs, but those were his lungs. And that's the x-ray after he got his new lungs. And the quote that he says is, "It's an evil I've never seen before in my 20 years of doing lung surgeries." And this is Daniel before. In high school, he was an athlete. He was a great student. He tells you that he was very stressed, as most teens are in high school, and he looked up something he thought was going to help him with the stress, and he found vapes. He never even bought his own vape. He had a twin brother who wasn't impacted in the same way, so you never truly know how you're going to be impacted. Why Daniel? But he became a regular user, nothing to the degree of you've seen in earlier videos, but this is him after. And this is his nonprofit. I encourage you to look it up. And we're trying to get him here to Bloomfield Hills High School. He said this on one of our virtual meetings. The only thing that should be in your lungs is oxygen. It's so basic. We know this, right? So why do we put anything else in it? This stood out to me so much, I made a poster out of it. And it'll be plastered hopefully all over the school. So what's happening with our students? Here we go. Here's some data. And I'll try not to go through all of this because I want to be mindful of your time, but I feel you should know what's happening with our students. This is data taken from December in 2021. It was taken 8th through 12th grade students, Birmingham and Bloomfield Hills public schools. So it's your data, guys. And we administered it to just over 3,400 students. After cleaning it, just a little over 3,200 students for each question. Those that didn't answer a question or incomplete surveys, they were excluded. Also, if they answered that they used a fake drug, which we have in the survey, those were excluded. So we came out with a really good data set here with over 3,200. This is the breakdown by grade and by gender. So you can see there a lot of 8th grade and a lot of 9th grade. We had a little bit smaller percentages in 10th and 11th and 12th, and that just was simply administration at the time. It was a virtual survey. It wasn't given in all classes. Typically, we get much higher numbers. So I feel like you're going to see lower numbers in vapes. I feel like it is a little bit underreported. But again, we were just back in December 2021, right, for the first time after the year prior. So I do feel like, use was just starting to climb back up. I want to first draw your attention to the mental health and wellness section. We really expanded this since our teens told us a number of years ago this was an issue they were dealing with. So we started asking this. And I want to just, for you parents to know this is what your teens are feeling, and for you young people here to know if you are feeling this way, you're not alone. Right? So we asked, during the last month, did you ever feel so sad or hopeless every day for 2 weeks or more in a row? You stopped doing your usual activities. And you can look at the percentages, but I call your attention to the ends or the numbers. That's a lot of kids. That's about 828 kids combined for this survey, feeling that way. And then over here, during the last month, did you ever feel so overly anxious or stressed? You found it difficult to do your work, take care of things at home, or get along with people? I kind of call that getting through a day, right? And look at how much higher that jumped up. That's 1,200 kids in high school, 376 in middle school, combined 1,581 kids. So it's way more than that now, and we will be surveying again coming up this December. But again, you saw that we had much lower percentages of 11th and 12th graders, so I'm sure. But it's high numbers. Here's how we ask the mental health questions. Each of these categories, right? Because we really wanted to break it down. So what does that mean? How are you feeling? Are you having less fun? You're just sad or depressed for several hours, and so on and so forth. And we ask it in a way that asks never, some of the time, most of the time, or all of the time. So we're really getting deep dive into this. And I'm not taking you through all the mental health, I promise. I'm going right to vape use next. So this chart represents all the substances, but I call your attention to the vape with the arrows and the yellow. This is past 30 day for high school. So you can see there any vape use, about 288 kids, vape with nicotine a little bit less, vape with THC just under 200, vape with flavor 103. And these are the national comparisons. The reason you're only seeing 8th, 10th, and 12th is when the national survey that's used is monitoring the future. They only survey 8th, 10th, and 12th, so we can only compare to 8th, 10th, and 12th. But our data set, the good thing about that is we have all the teens, and we can show you and break it down by all of the teens. But for the purposes of tonight, I'm just going to scale it back for you, and you can see how we compare to the national averages. And or under. Again, do I believe, this might be a little bit higher because we don't have all of the older students, but still, it actually gets quite high when you look at vape with nicotine in the past 30 days. And then past year youth, it jumps up to over 20% in the 12th grade. So that is concerning. So this is any vaping use past 30 day and past year. So this is any vape use, and you can see how it jumps up, right? We were looking at nicotine in the past slide. This one is any vape use, and you can see how much it jumps up, particularly, like I said, as kids get older, they're using more and more vapes. So here's some national data for you. No surprise, e-cigarettes have been the most commonly used tobacco product among youth since 2014. 1 out of every 35 middle school students reported e-cigarette use. This is a 2021 national survey. And then 1 out of every 9 high school students reported it in the past 30 days. And then here's the National Youth Tobacco Survey. These numbers are daunting. 2.55 million middle and high school students reported past 30-day e-cigarette use. That's 14.1% of high school students and 3.3% of middle school students. 85% reported using flavors. So they're still getting them, right? 46% of high school users report frequent use and 30% daily. And daily means a lot throughout the day. So what's the influence? So from our data, again, these are the top influences for students who reported that they vaped. Well, if they perceived that other students or their friends were vaping, they're more likely to vape. Ease of access, I'll talk about that more in a minute. Lower perception of risk, they don't think it's as harmful. And the grade they are in other words, use goes up by grade. Why? This is from the Monitoring the Future 2019. I thought this was a really good chart to show you another reason for the why, right? I just show you influences, but look at how high it is to experiment, see what it's like. That's why everybody probably starts. That's over 60%. Tastes good, that goes to flavors. To have a good time with my friends, that's a social thing. We know that's happening. These in circle, though, get to some of the mental health issues, right, and mood disorders, to relax or relieve tension. That increased by more than 1/3. To feel good or get high, to get that jolt that they get right away, that feel-good feeling that those dopamine receptors do. Boredom, looks cool, and then that last one that's circled there, I'm hooked, I have to have it, and that more than doubled. So access, how easy is it to get vapes? So these are the numbers from our survey. 40% or 1,252 of our students reported it was easy or very easy to get vapes with nicotine. 30% or 954 students reported it was easy or very easy to get vapes with THC. It's a lot. And 34.6 or 1,081 reported it was easy or very easy to get vapes with flavors. So it's pretty accessible. Where? These are the top places that teens reported they got their vapes. Number 1 was buying it from a store. So you heard Seema say, how old are you? Yep, I'm 21. Okay. So we work on that, by the way, in the county. We work on retailer education for alcohol and for vapes and for cigarettes to make sure. And there are checks that go on. But it happens. And online, all you have to do is check a box. Given by a friend, these are the other top reasons. Offered or shared by a friend. By the way, a lot of sharing goes on, which can create like mouth issues and, increased sickness. So yuck, yeah. Borrowed from someone I know or bought from a friend. So we're wrapping up here, so hang in there with me. This is an important slide. We thought if you ever found yourself needing help related to a drug or alcohol problem, who would you talk to? And we are hearing that a lot of kids who started vaping are addicted and want to stop. So hopefully they'll talk to somebody. What you see here, the top 3 in both cases, middle and high school, parent followed by family member and friend. But what I want you to pay attention to in the yellow highlighted over there is those that don't know or would turn to no one. That's a lot of kids who are really, really at risk. And I think it's great as a parent myself that they would talk to me, but am I really equipped, right? And then a friend or a family member for sure. So I think number 1, to coming to parents is good, but going to somebody that's a knowledgeable source that can help you. And we're also hearing they don't really know that they have that. All right, so let's break it down even further when we're talking about mental health. So the high school students that stated during the past 30 days they felt sad or depressed for several hours, most of the time or all of the time, were 2.6 times more likely to have used vapes or e-cigarettes with nicotine, 2.8 times to use vapes with THC, and 3 times more likely to have vaped any substance in the past 30 days. So mental health is having an impact on our students' choices to vape. And we have that same data for the other substances. I'll just do one more. Irritated, annoyed, past 30-day substance use. 2 times more likely to have used e-cigarettes with nicotine in the past 30 days, 2.2 times with THC, and 2.4 times for any vape. So now, we've heard a lot about vapes. What can we do, right? Don't be scared. You know, we are all caring, compassionate people. And there are things that you can do, and there are resources. So signs your teen is struggling, not just with vapes or any other substance, but just signs they may be struggling and things you need to dial in on, because we've seen that mental health is an indicator for substance use, particularly vapes. How many times have we heard "I'm okay" when you ask? I'm okay doesn't, I hear it all the time too when my kids were in high school, and even now they'll say it. Sometimes it just means I'm not okay, but leave me alone, right? Change in regular habits or routine. Change in a friend group. Increased isolation. Emotional outbursts. And substance use and abuse. And how do you decipher this from being a normal teen? Well, I think as parents, you know, we get, what do you call it, the spidey sense? You know, we know. You know. But asking questions never hurts. Okay, so signs your teen is vaping. Bloodshot eyes. Increased thirst because vaping dehydrates the mouth and the throat. Nosebleeds. Adding extra salts or spices to food, because if you're a regular vapor, you know, you get a vapor tongue, you can't really taste flavors as well. Chronic cough due to the irritated lung tissue. You might hear this first thing in the morning if they vaped, or right after they vaped, or it might just be a chronic cough, and they're not sick. Unfamiliar pens, USB devices in their room, car, backpack, pillowcases. I know this from experience. Items that look like USB drives or other electronic devices. You're starting to miss chargers. And maybe that happens already, because that's a thing too, but a lot more, and I know that from experience. Being secretive and intensely protective of their privacy. Irritability and mood swings as a result of withdrawal symptoms. Ants in the bedroom. That's not for food, but the flavoring. And remember how I said that those residues are going on things? The floor, the carpets, the beds, right? It can draw insects. The last thing I want you to know, if you think your teen is vaping, you're probably right. Wrong. But if you have a hunch, or if something's sticking out to you,
because
more kids vape than you know, and they may have tried it, and you think, no way, never. No way, never, my kid is not something, you know, that you can think, especially when it comes to vapes. And especially as we know that it is a gateway to THC. Our teens and our high schools are saying that. They're vaping, and we're hearing that from administration as well. They're vaping, and they're vaping THC. So what can you do, right? Ask questions, but listen first. Validate what they're saying and what they're going through. That's important, because we always want to fix something right away and have the answer, but put on the listening ears first. Pause if things escalate. This is hard to do. I also know this from personal experience. Take a break if things get out of hand or you just want to go there right away. Timeouts are for parents too. Tell them if you don't have the answer, but you'll work with them to find it. Give them space and time, especially if they ask for it, right? This is an emotional topic, especially if you call them out on something you found or you suspect. It's not going to be a one-and-done conversation, and there isn't a rule book. You just have to follow the pause and then keep going. Make sure they know your values and expectations. Chances are they do, but again, that's not a one-and-done conversation. You have to keep having that conversation. Come up with guidelines together. Even though it may not seem like it, and they're quiet, and they roll their eyes or walk away, they do need the boundaries. I think you guys would agree with that. I heard this in a webinar I was on last year, and we hug. Quick hugs, right? You guys hug your moms and dads. But there's something about this that stood out to me. Make it a longer hug. Hold on for 8 seconds. It feels really good to give and get a hug for a long time. I love this. Self-care for you, the parent. Now I'm talking to you guys, right? Because it's not easy being a parent of teens, especially today, and especially with the peer pressure that they're dealing with that you have to deal with. So take care of yourself, because if you go crazy, it's no good for them. So here are some resources to support you and your teen. Your schools have a ton of resources. If you're not sure what to do, contact them. If you think your teen is struggling, I call it backdooring it. Reach out to a counselor, to somebody. Hey, I think they're having a rough time, or I'm not sure what's going on. Can you check in on them? Call them down, have a conversation, make it about the schedule, whatever. Your doctor, your pediatrician. Vaping is getting a lot more attention, and if you think there's an issue, ask them for their advice. These are some other resources here. BBCC, thank you very much, and our Youth Action Board. It's a great place for healthy connections for teens to reach people from other schools that you wouldn't normally meet. I have a flyer over here for you. Reach out to me and come to a meeting. It's lots of fun. And so there's just some more resources, and I'm going to create a one-pager of the key things, including resources, that I'll email Angel, and she'll get it out to everybody. Teens, what you can do, no matter what, have a plan, right? You guys study for tests. In COVID, we wore masks. We protect ourselves, right? So this is just another thing of life you have to have a plan for and protect yourself. You're going to be in a pressureful situation if you haven't already. It's going to happen. Have a plan. Who's your influence to make a good choice? Yourself. Good. Your sister. Good. Lock that in. Hold on to it. Practice what you would say. Man, I'm sick. I'm not touching that. Right? I don't feel good. I have asthma, even if you don't. I'm allergic to everything. Here's just some things. My parents will freak if I do this, right? I gotta go. I'm driving. I've heard this from older students all the time. They use driving as an excuse. And here's a quote I want to give you from a student that graduated and is now in college living his best life. But he said to me as a junior, I've watched my friends give into peer pressure countless times, and it's heartbreaking to watch. I think it's just being ready for a pressureful situation. You're ready for everything else, right? So make this your test that you get ready for.